Doug Brown, grindcore fan, crate digger, and author of Slave to the Grind. It isn't called author, it's called editor, it's called producer. So, you live in Canada?
Yeah, I'm in Toronto, where I've been my entire life, other than when I went to university, just another spot in Ontario. But yeah, I really like Canada. You know, obviously you're in Sweden, so we have a lot of similarities between our countries in terms of, I guess, the progress and, you know, healthcare and whatnot. And yeah, good places to live for sure.
Yeah. When did you get into grindcore from the beginning?
It was a weird entry, and I think a lot of people have these like haphazard entries into grind. You know, I was a thrash metal kid, and I just couldn't have enough of like the speed, and then that led me to death metal. So I kind of went from like, you know, the Metallica, Slayer type, and then Obituary, which is odd because that's a really slow death metal band, but I was really taken with like just like the growls. And another entry band for me, which is you know, nothing I listen to too much anymore, but I was really big into Fear Factory when Demon came out in the mid '90s. Like that just blew my mind, you know, like. And then I went back and got Soul for a New Machine, and which, like, those two for me are just incredible albums. And then because I was into like heavier and heavier things, I became aware of Relapse Records, which in turn got me into bands like, you know, Dillinger Escape Plan, which, you know, I know are not grind, but, you know, like blast a little bit. Yeah. And I got one of those like contaminated CD samplers, which had like a whole bunch of like Relapse related tracks on it. And, you know, I was interested in like, you know, like the Dillinger type bands on there, but then there was like some like even more extreme. I think there was an Origin song on there. Yeah. But then the two that stood out, there was a couple tracks by Agoraphobic Nosebleed, which I just thought was the most like ridiculous thing. And keep in mind, this would have been like late '90s Agoraphobic, so it wasn't like more recently. It was like really balls to the wall. And then Soylent Green was the other band on there, and which is Ben Falgo's from Goat Whore, and before he started Goat Whore. And Soylent Green were like the best gateway band for like an up and coming grind fan, because they totally blasted, but they also had those like groovy southern parts. But I didn't even know the word grindcore. It's just like, it was all just weird death metal, right? Until you visualize it. And then from there, like, yes, I found Napalm Death, but like I started listening to Fear, Emptiness, Despair. So it was like death metal Napalm Death, right? So exactly. It wasn't until like somebody's like, you're kind of listening to some grind bands, and I was like, what's grindcore? And then I realized, oh, that's that part of that Soylent Green song I really like, or that's like, you know, the end of this Napalm Death song, because at that point they were definitely more death metal than grind, right? And so that was kind of my like kind of haphazard entry in like the late '90s, early 2000s. But then once I knew that term, it was like, okay, well, what should I check out by Napalm Death? And then, you know, obviously, From Enslavement to Obliteration happened, and then I knew what grindcore was. You know, like that was one of those like, that is what it is. Like, check, you know. And then it was like nothing would stop me from finding anything that sounded like that. I just needed everything.
So you had listened to it for a while before you understood what grindcore was.
It did take a while. Like, and I'm not going to pretend like I loved it immediately. I know that there's some people who, you know, are like 7 years old and then like listen to grind and it's their like life. That was not me. Like I was a metalhead, you know, and then like became a lover of grind, and then realized like the punk and politics of it, and kind of fell in love with that aspect. So kind of went a roundabout way, I'd say.
In the Napster era, I downloaded what I thought was Metallica's new album. It must have been in '99, like new Metallica song, something like that. And I started listening to it, and it didn't have any name, but I really enjoyed it, and I listened to the all 38 tracks. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And I was like, no, this can't be. And a couple of years later, I met Niklas, the singer of the Arson Project, and he told me this is Pig Destroyer. And I was like, what? Is this Pig Destroyer? I listened to this so long ago. And that's what I love about the Napster era, when you could like download something and you got something totally different. And in that way, you like found something from the golden pound of extreme underground music, you know.
Well, we're roughly the same age, right? So Napster was definitely that gateway for me. And I'll tell you a similar story, but in a different direction. I went onto Napster, and same scenario, except it was like unreleased song with Cliff Burton. And, you know, I'm a huge Metallica fan, and it must have been like, again, 1999. And I checked it out. And do you know who Wesley Willis is?
Wesley Willis? No. Just
like
ringing bells.
He's a comedian that like essentially just sings songs about like having oral sex with animals. And
tasteful.
I was like in grade 11 at the time, and I was at a friend's house, and he had a computer that was fast enough to download, like I didn't at my house. And then this song came on, and I laughed so hard. You should check out Wesley Willis. Everybody who's listening to this, check out Wesley Willis. Absolutely ridiculous. But and I assume that what you downloaded was 38 counts of battery.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's the first one, right?
I think so.
Yeah, so it must have been. I remember it was like so many tracks, and it was, God damn it, Cheerleader Prostitute. Yeah, that's on 38 Counts of Bad. Yeah, that was a long time ago. Do you still listen to
that album?
Yeah, me too. It has done a lot for my music taste. I don't listen to it that much. I don't listen to that much to Pig Destroyer all anymore, but that's an enjoyable album. But you come from the thrash metal scene. Yeah? What was the first extreme band that got you into like fast music?
Well, I'm trying to think, because Ozzy Osbourne had this festival, Ozfest, in like the late 90s. Yeah. And, he had some like thrash bands on there. So when I was buying those like Ozfest samplers, I remember there also being, I think I got it because I was into Sepultura, who are like, kind of halfway between thrash and death metal. But it was a live Fear Factory track, Replica was on that one. And I remember like, I got to hear more of this band. And that's what kind of like got me into the Fear Factory route. And I'm not sure if this is something that is in Sweden, but in North America, we would have like Columbia House Records and BMG Records, which were like record clubs where you could like mail away for, like 10 CDs for $1, but then you have to buy 5 CDs over the next couple years at like full price sort of thing. So then what I did was, because I knew I liked like Metallica and everything, they had like recommended artists. So I was just like, this cover looks evil, like this looks scary. Like Satan's on this cover. Like that's how I found like Morbid Visions by Sepultura. It's like, this cover's so ridiculous. I need to get this, And in retrospect, it's kind of like a black metal album, but that might be also just the production aspect of it. But it was like just being an immature kid, like looking at those CD covers and then buying things that you don't always like. And then like I ended up with some industrial albums that didn't really click with me, just because like the covers looked scary. But inevitably it was like I was just looking for pulverizing drumming, So anything with like really fast drumming, I wanted more of.
We had the same in Sweden. We had the Ginsa catalog, and you get all the album names in like it's like big as a phone book, and they sent you this like every like 6 months, and you can just watch the titles. And as soon as you saw a title that had something like gory or anything in it, it's like, this is good stuff. I'm gonna order it. And sometimes you can also see the pictures, but that's how I bought albums. Like I don't know, when I bought my first albums, maybe at 9, 10, something like that. But that's how I picked them, definitely, like the artwork. That was it. So I ended up with like Solniger Within. It's Fredrik Thorena, you know this?
Yeah.
Awesome stuff, right?
Just like that'll like blow your mind. And
yeah,
that alone are just so wild.
I think I was 11, and I saw Meshuggah at the same year. Actually, they played at our hometown. They came from the town where I lived when I was 11, and also Refused. So I saw Refused and Meshuggah that way. Yeah, but that's how I found Sooniger Within. Great album. I'm happy you knew about it.
Yeah, and I actually, to bring it back to filmmaking, oddly enough, I was acting in a film many years ago. It must have been like 2003, 2004. I was an actor before I was a director. And awesome. Another crew member, saw me on down days, and I was wearing like, metal shirts, and he's like, you should check out Meshuggah. And I hadn't heard of Meshuggah yet. And maybe it was a year or two later, because it was just after they put out I.
Yeah.
And I went over to his place. He's like, let's listen to one song. And then, that song's 21 minutes long. And then afterwards he played me all of their like side projects and everything. And, I'm also really big into progressive rock, like I love like Rush and Yes and King Crimson and stuff like that. So I also gravitated towards like the metal bands that played, syncopated rhythms. And I'm not sure do you know Spiral Architect?
Do you mean the song of the last song of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath?
It's a band that named themselves after that track.
Okay, that's my favorite track with Black Sabbath. Yeah, it is. I fucking love that track.
Yeah, it's awesome. Definitely check out the band Spiral Architect. They are like kind of like Iron Maiden-esque vocals, but the most complicated arrangements, like almost like arrogantly so. And that was another band around that time that I was listening to that was just like mind-boggling metal. I think one of the guys from Borknagar is in it. I could be wrong. I don't know. It's been a while since I've listened to them, but yeah, around that time in like the early 2000s, it was like, death metal, and more grind was coming in, but also like spaced out prog stuff and Hawkwind and this is some of my records here, and I will forever be after music that I've never heard. That is like the theme of my life, so to speak.
You have something Swedish behind you. That's IKEA.
Yes.
Yeah, it's perfect for vinyls.
It is, yeah. And this is the Expedite, which is the original line, because I think now they're using the Kallax shelving. It also works. But yeah, I have several of these in all the rooms of my house, just lining the walls. And IKEA, isn't that Swedish for common sense?
No, I don't know why he called it IKEA. I have no idea, but it doesn't mean anything in the Swedish language.
Oh, okay. Why two in Canada?
Okay, common sense.
That's what I was once told, but okay.
About that Meshuggah single, I. Do you remember? It's like it has. It's called I, like I, and you, like I. And when you open it up, the CD is an I that you put your finger through it.
Yeah.
And this all the Swedish people understand, but it says AJ. Yeah, it's like somebody screaming it, but it says I, and that means ouch. So, but you pronounce it I, so it means I. like you get heard.
That was lost on me as an English speaking person. I had no idea. That's cool. Yeah.
When did you start going to live shows?
I was like early high school, I'd say. But none of my friends listened to metal, so I was going to a lot of like pop punk shows, and all my friends were in like like pop punk and like skate punk type shows, ska bands, and then every once in a while I'd go to like a metal show. Like the first show I went to was Metallica when I was in grade 9, and it was when they were on the Reload tour. And I was already like an arrogant kid that was just like, I hope they only play the first 4 albums, like even at the age of like 13 or 14. And then some of the first extreme shows I went to were actually black metal when I was in grade like 11, 12. So I must have been like 16, 17. And like Cradle of Filth and Dimmu Borgir would come through. And And for some reason, my mom thought it was cool for me to go to those. And the death metal shows at the time were never all ages, but the black metal shows were. Like, there was like, at least the big ones. Like, I'm sure there was all sorts of underground things I had no idea of. The first time I ever went to like a basement show, I was actually in grade 9 going to grade 10, and I was visiting my friend Billy in, where was I? In BC. And there was a skate punk band called DBS that played that never really broke out of Canada. But they were pretty cool and had like some like techie screamo parts to them. And I remember like always wanting that again, like a really small show in a place that there probably shouldn't be a show. And it wasn't until many years later, probably until I was like in first year university, like in my, maybe I was 20, I started finding those types of shows, and I was like, this is where I belong, and where like you can actually like smell the band because there's like no room, and then there's, maximum 100 people in the room. Like and obviously that's where grindcore thrives, in my opinion. Like I love big festivals, but nothing beats like, one touring band and 4 local bands in this like tiny basement. Like that's tops. Yeah.
Awesome. You told me the first show you went to was Metallica, and that must have been in 1997, the Reload tour.
Yeah.
That was also my first show. My father woke me up like, 5 a.m, and just gave me a leather jacket, and we drove out to the airfield, and we flew to Stockholm from the north part of Sweden. And later that day we saw Metallica, and I hadn't listened to their old stuff yet because I must have been like 12 years old. So I enjoyed. Give me a few, give me fat,
Hey, that's a good tune. I still like that song. There's like Reload in many ways is my least favorite Metallica album. Like I like Saint Anger more than I like Reload.
Yeah.
That's a controversial opinion. I love that I'm already defending Saint Anger here.
I defend the snare sound.
Yeah, totally. Like we all listen to garbage. Like how is that the most offensive thing about Saint Anger? Like, I love that,
Like, yeah.
Yeah, and like, but in retrospect, there's a lot of things that like I hated when I was a kid that now that I'm a little more mature about it, that I have like a pretty good ear for and I enjoy, Like I went through a phase where like I would only listen to Left Hand Path, like anything else that they did was horrible. But now I'm like, like I like Wolverine Blues, and there's some good tunes on there, and my tastes have matured, so to speak.
Yeah, Wolverine Blues kicks ass.
It does. It's awesome.
Yeah. I saw a picture of Yngwie Malmsteen today when he reviewed Wolverine Blues. Yeah.
That's where he's like,
yeah. Yeah, he hasn't matured yet.
Yeah.
Did you ever play any instruments yourself? Did you ever play in a band?
Yeah, I've been in quite a few bands, but nothing like we've talked about. So I was in like kind of like a bluesy prog rock band in university. We played, a cross between, let's say, the Allman Brothers and Rush. And we played at like all the bars and the occasional gig. And then I was in like some kind of like bands that sounded a bit like At the Drive-In, so to speak.
I haven't heard it.
Or do you know the Mars Volta?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the guys from Mars Volta before they became Mars Volta. They were a little more punk.
Ah, okay.
So I was in like bands like that. But, as a drummer, I've always gravitated towards like funk, R&B, jazz. So when I'm playing, it's like, I try to sound like the funk band Tower of Power or James Brown, or like that's kind of the way I play, and I've always played. I've tried blasting, and I do have a double kick, and it's a lot of fun for me. And one day, maybe when I'm like 50 years old, I'll start a grind band. But for now, I just have a lot of fun just doing like slow pocket groove, funky stuff, and Variety's the spice of life, like I was listening to a jazz fusion album just before I turned on this Zoom call, and, afterwards I'll, probably put on some Warsaw, like who knows,
Is that the reason why you like Dillinger Escape Plan, when you hear like a mixture between some grind, some hardcore, but also some, technical, what is it called, like electronic music mixed with pop and stuff like this? It's like,
yeah. Like what I loved about Dillinger is like I got into them just when Calculating Infinity came out, which is kind of a cool time in their history because, a lot of people consider that kind of like the apex of their playing, and Chris Penne on drums is obviously a phenomenal drummer. But they went through a few vocalists in a row there, and, having Mike Patton sing that Irony is a Dead Scene EP. And I was a huge Mr. Bungle fan for the same reasons you just listed, like some technical stuff, some like Middle Eastern music, some, a lot of pop music, especially in California, which I think is like an incredible album. Anything that is like, I guess, like kind of pushing the boundaries of music. Like I wanted to hear things that, sounded like nothing else, like the Frank Zappas of the world. And Dillinger, like the song like 43% Burnt is an example, like so many changes and that kind of like, I think it's in like 5 and then 7, that weird little freak out part in the middle. It's not distorted. I love stuff like that. Right. And I think that's also why I gravitate towards some of the stranger grind bands and grind bands that aren't just grind, like that will have some soundscapes. And well, I'm wearing, one of my favorite Polish grind bands right now on my shirt, like there are, yeah, like another band that does some, excellent time things and isn't always grind. And like I did some composition as well before I went into directing. Like I composed the soundtrack to 2 documentaries, one which is completely like electric acoustic design based. A documentary called 2 Summers in Kosovo, about Kosovo gaining its independence over the span of 2 summers. And then another movie, The Death of Indie Rock, which was more of like an alternative rock soundtrack. So I've played a lot of different types of music, which is I think also why I want to listen to music that sounds so different.
Awesome. So you can like call it you like to be surprised when you listen to music, right? Yeah, for sure. And I think my favorite bands surprised me the first time I heard them. Yeah. When the first band you hear always surprises you because you haven't heard anything yet, right? And I was fortunate enough to have a cousin when I was 8 years old, maybe this mixtape that had like Metallica and Megadeth and Faith No More and all these bands on it. And, when all your friends are listening to like Boys to Men and Vanilla Ice, it was pretty shocking when you're 8 years old. Yeah, for sure. I met you the first time at Obscene Extreme. No, that's the only time I met you, actually.
Yeah.
I remember you very well with your hat and sitting by a tree, and I came by and was like, "Are you Doug Brown?" And I needed some inputs on how I could, in the best way, make my own film, my own project. And I'm very thankful for your tips and tricks, even if you don't remember them. I'm not sure if I do either, but
I do remember talking with you for sure. And anybody who's watching this can tell I like to talk, and especially about things that I love to do. So filmmaking is very near and dear to my heart. And you did a great job with the Chirby film. You should be very proud of that. That's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was a very sincere movie, he's also a very sincere guy. So I'm not surprised that so many people had such great things to say about him in the festival, but the film had such a positive vibe to it.
Yeah. Nice. And you were there promoting your own film, Slave to the Grind.
Yeah, that was our kind of the beginning of a series of screenings. We had only screened Slave to the Grind a couple times in Canada, a few times in the States, and I think once in Italy at that point. And then, it played 3 times over the OEF weekend. and then I went back to Toronto, and then got on the road with Rich Hoke and Total Fucking Destruction, and then we played like his band would play, and then the film would play every night for about a week, I'd say, and that was a lot of fun in different cities, and other like grind bands joined in, and I guess my goal always was, from the beginning, was to find ways of pairing the film with bands playing. And it's tough because like the movie's 100 minutes, right? Like it's like an hour 40, and grind fans don't have the best attention span, So
that was my following question, actually. Yeah.
So it was, we were very strategic at what time the film always had to play and everything. And but it was a lot of fun. Like obviously it played at a lot of festivals as well, like proper film festivals. But for me, the best screenings were the ones with bands and like gritty environments. Yeah,
awesome. I got like YouTube comments on the Sherby movie, and it's like, this is too long for grindcore fans. I guess you have like hundreds of those, right?
Oh yeah. Like even when the trailer came out, and our trailer is under 2 minutes, they're like, this trailer is longer than the movie should be. Like, come on.
Do you always respond to the YouTube comments?
I have a philosophy of never responding to anything.
Oh, okay.
So I have, and recently we put our film up for free on YouTube. Obviously, if you wish to purchase it, go to deathbydigital.com because there's other bonuses and extras and whatnot. But I think there's like 1,000 comments on it, and people like to always chirp it if it's I thought this was a film about Skid Row, because the album's Slave to the Grind. And I'm sure there are legitimate people who like see it and they're like, oh, cool, a film about my favorite Skid Row album. And then either they're really disappointed or they're like, hey, maybe I'm going to listen to some heavier stuff, which I hope happens. The main comments that I receive are always, how come you didn't include this band? Yeah. And I remember when we even announced the project, we started getting like, if you don't have this band, you're an idiot. And when I first started making the film, because, like all documentaries, they take way too long. And this film was a 5-year production cycle, which is pretty common for all my films. Like my one before was about 4.5 years directing. And but because we were so public early on, there was a lot of room for people to voice their opinion of who they thought should be in it. And though that initially hit me as like, I should be listening to these people, it very quickly made me believe that not everybody has a great opinion of what should be included in something. And as much as I would love to have included every single band, it would make a very crowded documentary. Yeah. Like you only want so many voices, fighting for screen time. But then there's also the issue of like, there's going to be some people that just you can't get a hold of, right? And there's going to be those amazing bands, and we all know who are like the greatest grind bands of all time. And I always tell people is like, if you can think of them and wondering why I didn't put them in there, it's because they said no, or they just refuse to respond to anything, or are suffering from mental health issues, or they're dead. Like that's kind of like the 4 categories of why they're not in the film. It's not like, I've never, exactly. It's not like I've never heard of, some of these people before. I'm not an idiot. It's just like, you can't have everybody, and
the movie can't be 3 hours.
Yeah. and I don't think it should have been, no. Like I think we even pushed our luck a little bit with, an hour 40. But yeah, like, you can't please everyone, that's for sure.
What's the hardest part in editing the movie, like the process?
Yeah, I would say so I don't edit my own films. I work with 2 editors, and Steph and Rob have edited my last 2 documentaries, and I work with them pretty much exclusively. The process is I would give them footage. We would transcribe it word for word to time code. We would then take all of the time code and put it in a massive document. So every word that was spoken by any interview. We would then write the film on paper using excerpts from the time code. and then we would move them around on a wall of cue cards. We would then take those cue cards and slot them in digitally based on the time code that's written on the cue card. So if you think about, we interviewed 65 people between 45 minutes and 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
If you have excess of 200 hours of stuff, if you don't have that all written out, you are screwed, right? Especially when you're trying to tell a story that's a bit of a narrative, right? So the hardest part for me was wanting to edit immediately, because you get this footage and you're like, your mind's going to like, oh, when that guy headbanged there, that's going to match with this section here. And when Topon from Fuck the Facts is talking about the DIY nature of it, I'm going to cut to this person and it'll look really cool together. You want to do that, but my editors would always be, okay, Doug, slow down. Let's wait till we get more, right? And then when you are shooting something that's international, like we've interviewed people from like 20 different countries, it takes forever to organize all those people. So it's patience, just wanting to hit the ground running, but knowing that it is truly an academic process. And we learned that the hard way from our last film, where we would just like, oh, when did that person say that? And then spend like 40 minutes like skimming through something until you can find that clip. And then we're like, I should write that down for later. And we think we actually shaved like a year off the process just by taking 6 months to sit there and type out quite literally 1 million words in like 900 pages we typed.
I remember you telling me this before I started editing the Sherby film, and I still didn't do it. And I know what you're talking about. And it's like, in which interview and where did he say that? And I have spent like 40 minutes watching through an interview and trying to find that word, horrible. I need to learn to get more structured.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I think you actually have to make the mistake doing, because I was given that advice before Never Enough, my last documentary, and I still didn't do it, because you're just like, that seems like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it's not until you have spent the third 45-minute chunk looking through the same interview for that clip where you're saying to yourself, okay, I probably could have transcribed this whole interview now.
Yeah.
The amount of time that I spent looking just in this reel over the last couple of months, I probably should have just done that, and everybody cuts corners, we've cut all sorts of corners as filmmakers, but just in terms of storytelling, at least for me, that seems like the best technique. And hopefully the next film you will now realize the importance of that, just like I did. And yeah.
It I guess the fun part of doing of like creating a movie, I'm sure you would agree, it's like the creative part, when you can like, from that to this, and when he says this and they should do that. But to be able to do it, you need to have some structure in it. So hard work leads to a lot of fun. Is that the right word for it?
Yeah, for sure. Like it's like an investment. Like you have to truly invest in what you're doing, because if you don't, what ends up happening is it just is frustrating the whole time, right? And I ended up like hating my last film, like Never Enough, halfway through the process, and I realized I needed to be more organized to enjoy it.
Yeah.
So I just wasn't like frustrated every time we were editing it, or like always feeling like I was like sprinting up a hill. That's what it felt like on my last film. It also helps working on a subject matter where I already knew I had an audience. I'm not sure what we are going to do in terms of publicity for our next documentary, but it was nice knowing that even if this film doesn't play in any festival, there's still going to be a lot of grindheads that are excited for it. Versus the film beforehand, we didn't even tell a single person we were making the film until the trailer was done. And then it was just kind of like dropping it out there and then like trying to get people interested in my last doc. And it was tough. So for at least the subject matter of like an intimate group of musicians, I thought that it made sense going about it the way I did. obviously not applicable to every documentary, but worked for this one at least.
Yeah. I just need to check the camera. Wait.
Yeah, sure. Do you think?
You have 2 daughters and a wife in Canada. How old are your kids?
Madison is 4 and Mackenzie is 7. Yeah, and it's a full house with them, my wife, and 3 cats, and like 10,000 records. Those are all my babies, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. I always have a kid in like the middle of making a film, which will not be happening again. But right in the middle of production on Never Enough, Mackenzie was born, and then right in the middle of production on Slave to the Grind, Madison was born. So, which children put a wrench in your creative plans, especially when it's not your full-time job, so to speak. I don't need to tell you, like we're working artists. We do all these cool creative projects, but we also have our day job that can actually pay the bills. And yeah, children take up a lot of time. And but the best part about having kids for me is just exposing them to all sorts of cool art and watching them watch it for the first time or watching them listen to it for the first time. I have lots of records here that they probably don't want to listen to, but there's also like I have a little section over here, which is, for, Maddie and Mackenzie, where like I'll buy them, soundtracks to Disney films and stuff like that on vinyl. And then, so they know they have their own little section, but they also like, I want to listen to Daddy's yelling music. And then, I'll pull out something inappropriate up here. And actually the big faux pas was once, I think it was actually Recaputrefaction that I left out. And my youngest daughter was maybe 3 at the time and was just like, Daddy, how come there's only part of a kid on this?
Yeah.
And like, that's how she phrased it. And I was like, oh man, I need to. Oh. So then at the time, all my grindcore records were at the bottom, and I literally took all the records off all the shelves, and now they're all at the top. So it's like, if they're old enough to reach it, then I can explain it to them. Yeah.
Awesome. And you told me you had like 10,000 records, or was just that a saying, or do you have 10,000 records?
Yeah, I guess it's probably pretty close to that, between 12-inch, 7-inch, a lot of obscure formats as well. And yeah, it's like a problem. I love it.
How have you organized the vinyls? By letters, by name?
Yeah, I do it first least by genre, and then so each area kind of has a different genre. In this room, most of this space is heavy stuff. I've separated grindcore from all the other extreme heavy stuff just because I listen to it so frequently. It kind of has its own section, and then alphabetical within genre. And then like the bottom here is all classic rock, and you can't see this side of the room here, but electronica. And in the basement, I have soul and funk and soundtracks and reggae. In the living room, I have jazz and indie rock. And it's just, and then there'll be like some things that I collect a little more profusely. Like there's some record labels that I'm trying to fully complete record labels, but then also like every Canadian pressing, every American pressing, every Japanese pressing, stuff like that. Yeah. And then there'll be some bands, and admittingly, I have an absurdly large Metallica collection where I collect Metallica like baseball cards, essentially. So, but between, and this might seem a little nuts, but between records, CDs, and cassettes, I have around 1,200 Metallica albums.
Holy shit, man.
Yeah, definitely one of the largest collections.
I guess I have like 8. I have the Golden Creeping Death vinyl, though.
There you go. Yeah, I just got an acetate of that, like a metal disc before they made the test pressing of Creeping Death, a 10-inch one, cool. With like literally hand carved on the label. One of my more recent purchases. It's pretty rad. Yeah.
When did you start collecting albums?
I guess like when I was 9, because it was because of Metallica. Like I think I mentioned earlier, my cousin Danny made me that mixtape, and then I got the Black album, and it was because I was like at a CD store, but cassettes at the time, and I saw a cassette single for Enter Sandman, and it had like a bonus live track on it, and I was like, hey, that's that song from that album that I like, but it's live, right? Then I was like interested in the idea of getting other things, and I only had like 10 cassettes at the time, and then some, like some cheesy hip hop stuff and some pop music, and like whatever an 8, 9-year-old was listening to at the time. But for some reason I was like, okay, let's get a couple cool Metallica things. When I got my first record, my mother gave me some money. I was up at the cottage to go in and just buy a CD back when CDs were just out, I would say. So maybe I was like 10 or 11. Well, they weren't just out, but they were just popular at the time. And I went in to get a David Bowie CD, but I came out with a record. And my mom was like, I don't even think our record player's hooked up. And I'm like, yeah, but the album cover's so big. Like it was just like, it's bigger, therefore it must be better, right? And like obviously I went down like the CD path like everybody else my age, but I would just, I had a part-time job at the library when I was in grade like 9 and 10, and every time I would make money, I would go down to the CD store and pick up, like obscure things and import Japanese pressings of Metallica albums already, when I was like 14, 15 years old. And then go down to like the vintage stores that had like records that were very cheap at the time, because it was like the late 90s and nobody wanted records. And I would pick up like Injustice for All for like $4 or whatever. And it was like, should I have spent $4? Is this a waste of money? But now those are worth more than $4. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But let's see. So you have collected albums for like 28 years. So that means like you buy like an album a day, more or less. Yeah, it must be.
Well, what I started doing, and this might sound a little nuts, but I've probably bought over 100,000 records in my life. What I do is just buy collections all the time. And then I will keep the best copy, and I compare it to like, oh, this is the same pressing, so I'm going to, replace the sleeve or whatever. And then I sell at all the record fairs and record shows in the area, and a bit online, but mainly in person. And my basement's set up like a record store, essentially, with like, thousands of records for sale, and people come over, and, it's like a little, punk and metal record shop down there. But when I was in second year university in Kingston, Ontario, there was this like collectible store that was kind of like a flea market. And I went in, and I was looking through all the records, and this was like the most like manic thing I had ever done. I said to the guy, I was like, hey, how much for all of the records? And he had obviously not really been selling these records, and they were kind of spread all throughout his shop and in different rooms. And I didn't really realize how many I was asking for when I said that. I thought I was like, I just saw a couple hundred records, and I thought this would be the coolest idea, just to invest in this. And he's like, well, let me call my business partner, and then we'll call you. And I had to go home because I didn't have a cell phone, and I had to wait for this phone call. And then he calls me, and he's like, $300 for all the records. And I'm like, hey, that's great, But at the time, records were not super cool, right? So I figured, maybe there was like 500 records there. I called up my friend. He had a car. I'm like, hey, we're just going to like do a load of records. But then when we got there, he's like, okay, so here's the records here, and there's some more here, and there's this room here. And I didn't realize this, but I bought just under 6,000 records that day. And it was 3 trips with the car packed to the brim. And I was living in this like 2-bedroom apartment with a friend, and he was away for the weekend. And he came home, and you could barely walk in the space. There was just like records everywhere. And I was like, okay, I know I was that guy with like 200 or 300 records, but now I gotta deal with this. So I like, a keep pile and a sale pile and a maybe pile and a check this out pile. And I have been doing that ever since. Yeah. So I was like a casual buyer for the first like 10, 12 years. And then, around, 2003, 2004, all of a sudden I was like, if there's 5,000 records for sale, I'm buying all of them. I'm keeping 50. I'm selling the rest, making some money, buying a rare Metallica record, buying another 1,000 records, keeping 10, selling 990 of them, making some money, buying a rare Metallica record. Like it was just like cycle of obsessive collecting. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, because it would if you would have bought them like one by one at a record store, yeah, god damn it, you couldn't have raised a family, right?
Yeah, I'd be on the street for sure, just like underneath my records to keep me warm. Yeah, like it's not like a normal hobby, and it's backbreaking. Like they're heavy, right? Like they're just so brutally heavy. But for somebody who's interested in history and music, like there's nothing that's more of a beautiful connection with like an artist than holding an album, you know, putting it on, sitting in your chair, looking at the sleeve, looking at the photographs, and you know, everybody sat there and looked at that like crazy photo of Mick Harris, just like, you know, but seeing that on the record as you're listening to it through your speakers, and that to me is that's the way to do it, you know? Yeah. I got a kid on one arm and a crate on the other. And actually, when you mentioned I was like against a tree, I bet I had a little carrying case with me. Yeah. That little wooden carry case. Yeah. I bring it everywhere with me, and I have tons of them. Just if I go traveling anywhere, my luggage is shaped to carry vinyl. Yeah. And this is ridiculous. Every shirt you see me wear at OEF, I threw out. I bring clothes to throw out so I have more room to bring records afterwards. So I brought all of my like old shirts with holes in them that were going to just be pitched anyways. And then I went to that OEF marketplace and just like went hog wild. And then I came home with like just the clothes I was wearing, and then yeah.
Is there some kind of holy grail that you are looking for, like vinyl-wise, that you don't have, that is possible to find someday at a reasonable price?
Probably not at a reasonable price, unfortunately. Like a lot of the things that I'm after are so specific. You know, like I have a lot of Metallica test pressings. But I really want a Megaforce test pressing of Kill 'Em All. You know, like the first Metallica album in test pressing form. I'm sure that's going to be a $3,000 to $4,000 purchase, which I'm not really financially prepared to do so. That would be me just selling a whole bunch of used records and then buying them. You know, it's not like I make all that much money. It's just that I'm selective with what I do with it, so to speak, and I'm very cautious. And I do, like I have a test pressing of Master Puppets. Like that to me is like one of the coolest items in my collection, but just in terms of like a first item, like that is something that I would like in my collection. I would love a test pressing of From Enslavement to Obliteration. You know, like I have kind of obsessively collected a lot of early earache stuff. Like I pretty much have everything. Like I have many copies of Scum in different covers. Yeah. I have all 3 colors with the original hype sticker on it. I
only have the orange one.
You get the orange one. Cool. Yeah. You got to get the red. You got to get the yellow. You got to you got to get the foil cover from Brazil. It's just like it's endless. But yeah, like a lot of the things that I'm like narrowing in on are things like that. There's a jazz label I collect called CTI, which stands for Creed Taylor Incorporated, and this jazz label released all these beautiful 7-inch picture sleeves, but they're only available in like Germany and Netherlands and France and some in Japan. So those are things that like I never find in person here, but I try not to buy too much online. I always like digging in person rather than buying online, you know, you can get anything you want if you have the money, but nothing's better than like going to a shop or going to a garage sale and just digging through records and then like that feeling, like nothing beats that feeling. That's the coolest feeling in the world.
That's awesome. What is the most like expensive item that you have in your collection?
So I have a record that I don't know its value because it's actually never sold on market. So I'm just going to assume this is rare. But I own a white label test pressing of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. And it's actually the only Canadian known copy of any test pressing they've ever released. Like, I assume either like the mother plate was sent from the States and that's why they only have American test pressings and not Canadian test pressings. But the matrix etchings all match up and everything. And a local record dealer sold it to me super cheap, just for a few $100s. I know it seems like a lot, but like for a Pink Floyd test pressing.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've had some people offer me several grand for it, and I don't think it's ever going to go for sale. I just kind of want to hold on to it, but who knows? Until another one pops up and somebody sells it, or until I sell it, nobody will know what it's worth, right? You know, I assume my Master of Puppets test pressing is worth quite a bit as well, and some 90s alternative stuff, like anything that was released in like 95, 96, 97, when like vinyl was at an all-time low.
Yeah.
You know, like bands like Nirvana and Blind Melon and Smashing Pumpkins, like first pressings of those albums, which I very fortunately bought a long time ago. I know those are all like $500 to $1,000 records now, and you know, buying them for $30, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's so many dollars, and now I'm like, why didn't I buy 10? You know?
So this is your life insurance, more or less.
Yeah, for sure, I guess. And then the market crashes, and I'll just be eating these, and that'll be my
exactly. Burn them to get warm.
Warm. Oh yeah. Another test pressing of the fire. Oh.
Just imagine. Oh, tragic. What's the album in your collection that you have listened to the most?
Master of Puppets.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's tricky because I have like I probably have 40 copies of it, but so I'm not sure which one I've listened to the most. But the album I've listened to the most in my life is probably that. Another one that I have listened to just so many times, and this is kind of left field, just because we haven't really talked about the genre at all, is October Rust by Typo Negative.
Great album. I showed this to my girlfriend like a year ago, and she's like, why haven't you showed me this before? And I was like, I didn't think you would like it.
It's just so like, it's like a beautiful sounding recording. Peter Steele, that's my favorite vocal performance of his. Love You to Death is one of my favorite songs of all time. Oh,
I get goosebumps. I get goosebumps when I'm thinking of it right now. Yeah. Thank you.
Because we're around the same age. You know, like anybody who's like a couple years older than me, it's just like, oh, that's cheesy, you know?
Yeah.
People who are even younger than me, like, you know, 10 years younger than me, they just don't get it. Like, you know, if you were born between, like, if you're born between like 81 and 87, you're going to love Typo. Maybe not, I don't know. But for me at least, that album, I had it on cassette, then on CD, and now on vinyl, and it's one of my faves.
I love how he pronounces the R's.
Yeah.
Breast. Yeah, it's awesome. Fucking great album. All the songs on that one. That's the only album that I like enjoy as a whole album of Typo Negative, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
It like I love World Coming Down, but there's just too many weird interludes in it, like, you know, like where you listen to people die, you know, like I think like Lung and a few others, and not every song on that, like there's some amazing songs on that, don't get me wrong, but not every song hits me like October Rust.
And especially Love You to Death. That's my absolute favorite track of that band.
Oh, so good. Yeah, for sure. Hands down. I'm glad that you agree. I never know bringing that up with another like extreme metal fan, because it's pretty left field, but I dig it. But
I can totally see why people find it cheesy, but it's a really magical album. I really enjoy it. I watched some live performance when they play it live. I think it was from Wacken and some other shows, and I always found it weird that a metal band could have like a stand with the lyrics laid down. So he's like standing and like reading the lyrics while he sings them. It's like, can't you remember your own lyrics? The whole crowd is singing them. You can't remember them. How come? Weird, right?
It was, you know, because he would drink 2 bottles of red wine before he went on stage there towards the end of his life. Like a liter and a half of red wine. Oh my gosh. I think it's even at that Wacken show where he like baptizes the crowd and he has his bottle of red wine. And he's kind of doing this. Yeah.
Peter Steele. And And the first time I saw his grown-up pictures, you have seen them.
Like the Playgirl?
God damn it! I wish I was Peter Steele.
He's like he was 6'7" or something. He was massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I love all those photos where he's playing like an upright bass.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and because he's just like, he was a giant.
Yeah. Awesome, dude. Back to your record collection. It's like when you start a project, it's very easy to have a goal. I guess you don't have one with your record collection. If you had one, what would be your final goal? It's like what would make you never buy a record again and just be pleased what you have and enjoy what you have? You have albums enough to listen to, like 4 albums at once for the rest of your life, I guess.
Right. You know, I don't think I can answer that question, because to me, record collecting is a fluid process. It's not like a static moment in time. You know, being a record collector isn't about having a record collection. It's about going out and getting records. Right. So, you know, to me, record collecting is just as exciting sitting at home and reading them as I am going to a record store and buying nothing. Like, both those things are very part of it. Obviously, I like going out and getting something, but just it's also a community. You know, like when I sell at record fairs, like I have customers that like always go to my table because I'm the guy that brings the weird stuff, right? And I have other record dealers that I know from doing this for so many years, and like that is part of the process. Like right around the corner from my house here, there's a reggae dealer that I know very well, and you know, if he comes across something, he's like, hey, here's a guy with really long hair, it must be metal. And then I'll be like, hey, here's a guy with dreadlocks, it must be reggae. Like, we will give each other things to sell at each other's tables that we know that we would do better with than the other person. And that to me is like a fun part of record collecting, just like the community aspect of it. So for me to have like an end goal, I guess it's just to never stop enjoying learning about the history of records. You know, like, I'm big into education. Like obviously I'm a documentary filmmaker, right? And, you know, I wouldn't be collecting records if it wasn't such a big process of learning for me, you know? And and every day I go out, I just learn more and more. And that's what's exciting for me. Like, obviously as like a Metallica collector, I'm like, I just want every Metallica record ever, but you know, that's impossible. Or obviously as like a label completist, like I want everything on that label, but it never ends. You know, like like Bonsai Records, which is a Canadian like thrash distribution label from the 80s. You know, like I know people who have every single record, and then they're like, okay, I guess I'll get the cassettes. You know, like you just justify another aspect of collecting, right? And then once you get all the cassettes, you're like, well, some of the cassette shells are a different color, so maybe I'll start. Maybe I'll start getting the promotional materials for the label. Maybe I'll start getting like magazines that have insert flyers. You know, it's just like, where do you draw the line? And then it's a moving target. You know, it's like, before I was like, oh, I'm gonna be so happy once I get 1,000 records, right? And then you're like, okay, so now I have 1,000 records. Okay, so I guess 1,100 to the goal now. You know, like it keeps moving. Like for years I used to say that, like, you know, a test pressing a Master Puppets was my white whale. Well, the second you get that, you just look for a different white whale, you know, like it's a void. Yeah.
Awesome. That was actually my following questions. Like, if you collect other stuff than vinyls, so we have talked about tapes, but I guess when you have all the vinyls and all the tapes, like a true collector will maybe not be pleased before you get the first poster of the first gig of the band in the Bay Area, you know.
Right. Yeah. And I do have that. You know?
You do have that.
These old yellowed posters, yeah. And I'm big into like press related materials, and not just Metallica, but all sorts of things. Like I have like old like obituary backstage passes from the 90s, and a lot of Anthrax and Slayer collectibles as well. Tour itineraries that would have like lists of like, hey, here's the contact when you get to the venue. This is the time of sound check. This is the hotel we're checking into. But for bands like Metallica, it'll be like a booklet that they would make 50 of just for the crew members. I have a couple like gold record awards that were like, I have a gold record award for Garage Days as an example. Do you have any set list? I have a couple set lists, not old though. I don't have any set lists before 99, I think. I have some old Slayer set lists. I have an old Megadeth set list kicking around. I like Earache when they signed that weird deal with Columbia Records in the mid-90s. They started doing all these like glossy promo photos that would be sent to radio stations for like Godflesh, Napalm Death, and might have been Brutal Truth, or maybe Relapse at that point had Brutal Truth, and maybe Relapse started doing those as well. But I'm collecting all these like weird 90s like glossy photos of grind bands, which is like the opposite of what you'd expect a grind band to do.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It was at that time when they thought grind was going to be big. So I've gone kind of a deep dive into collecting those as well. Yeah.
Do you collect any bootlegs?
Yes, I'm really into bootlegs. In particular, like I have a lot of Pink Floyd bootlegs, and I just went like hog wild and with them, Grateful Dead, a lot of Hendrix bootlegs as well. I love live recordings. I have maybe like 150 vinyl Metallica bootlegs, and then maybe another 200 CD bootlegs of Metallica. There's even like Brutal Truth and Napalm Death bootlegs out there as well. Repulsion bootlegs, Carcass bootlegs. Obviously not in the same level of abundance as you could find some other ones.
Yeah.
Big into Creator as well. I love Creator and Sodom and all thrash stuff. And there was a stage when it had to be like super crisp soundboard recordings, whereas like now I'm like, cool, there was an audience recording from a pocket, like somebody had like a pocket recorder and it's like muffled and sounds bad. If there's good performance energy, I want to listen to it. I don't care how bad it sounds. Like
Awesome. When you went to Obscene Extreme, I guess you were digging there. And in one of the tents, they have like old East Block bootlegs on tape. Did you go through them?
Oh man, I went hog wild. I bought so many of those on, is it TAC? Is TAC the label, I think? TAKK?
Wait, I actually took out two of them. MG.
MG, yeah.
I bought the Obituary and the Clandestine. It isn't Left in Path. I'm sorry.
Yeah, those. Obviously, I have all of those Metallica, but like every cover variation I'm trying to get. Yeah. And then they also did some live boots as well on MG. TAC is the other label I'm trying to think. I think I picked up an MG version of Schizophrenia by Sepultura there, and it seems so bad. Like it's a mono recording and super muffled, but I still listen to it a lot. Like there's something, I don't know. It's a good album to listen to in a low quality setting.
Yeah, exactly. I played the Obituary tape like 2 weeks ago, and I almost couldn't hear which songs it was. Actually, it's so bad quality, but it looks good, and it's a cool thing to have. And they're actually pretty cheap when you buy them in Czech. I guess I made a deal that I got them for like €5 each or something like that. Yeah. So it's like a cool thing to own.
Yeah, you can get them quite cheap. There's I'm trying to remember his name, but there's an online guy on eBay who I've contacted a few times, and I made him like a bulk offer of like, hey, I want these 20 that you have for sale. And then he'll, like, oh, okay, I'll give you free shipping or whatever. And it's always better to buy in bulk. And then the seller's happy and the buyer's happy, but my wallet isn't,
How many albums did you buy when you visited Obscene Extreme? And was that your first time at Obscene Extreme?
Yeah, it was my first time there. And I had to be careful just because I only had my carry-on and my backpack, it's like a backpack that looks like this thin, but then it pops open and it's built for records. So it actually has 7-inch sections, 10-inch sections, and can hold 25, 12 inches as well. It's made by Shure, like the microphone company. But so it's kind of for DJs, but and that's what had my clothes in it that I threw out and then filled with records.
Yeah.
But I probably bought 60 things there, I would say. A lot of 7 inches, a bunch of those MG tapes, and then trying to think, I got some like Czech Republic pressings of old grind things. I remember buying some Danak 7 inches.
Yeah.
I love Danak. They're incredible. And the singer of Danak, is he the guy that went on to do Looking for an Answer? Or am I getting him confused?
Great band, but I don't know.
Okay. I want to do something awesome, but yeah, you know, anybody who's watching this and hopefully post-COVID, when Obscene Extreme is allowed to run again, it is the most like inclusive, happy atmosphere. But if you are a collector, like definitely save up some money.
Yeah.
Because, it's like it's a mall. It's like an outdoor mall of just like 100 vendors just selling all sorts of like metal, punk, grind related things. And you know, all the dealers were super kind, and you know, they all run the labels that you all know, and like, you know, just knowing that you know, Self-Made God is there, and people who I've been also trading with for like 5-10 years. Like that's what was super cool for me. I'd be like, you know, at somebody's table and I look up and I was like, hey, are you Paul? You know, like, and then you have this conversation with somebody that you're like, oh my gosh, I've been buying off of you for a decade, you know?
And I guess you met Julio the Bastard.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I bought a lot of records off of, almost all the 12 inches I bought was off of him.
Yeah. Great band, by the way, Crippled Bastard. I just need to mention them. A great band. Did you pick up the album they released at Relapse? It looks like Korn, Follow the Leader.
Is that the one with the body falling?
Yeah, exactly.
Vala de, I won't be able to pronounce it.
Variante della Morte.
Yeah, where is it? It's up here somewhere.
I guess you have the purple version then.
Do I? There we go.
Ah, yeah. Okay, you got the red version.
Yeah, and actually, that was a band that I went kind of nuts collecting, and
the demo tapes.
Oh yeah, and I have 2 12-inch test pressings. I think I have a test pressing of Your Lies in Czech. Yeah, great band.
Did you see the release? They released 4 vinyls in a box.
Yes.
1,256. Don't correct me here. 1,256 songs between. I think it's like a 4-year period.
Well, I have most of those 7 inches, but it was nice to have it all in one package. You know? Same with Warsaw is another band that never really was a 12-inch band. Like they were a 7-inch band. So when there was a label that did a Warsaw collection, the Violent Swing discography, you know, and it's like, you know, like 100 tracks or whatever. And it's so nice to have it where I can just sit down for 20 minutes and listen to a side versus, you know, every like 3 minutes getting up, 3 minutes, 12 songs, another, you know. Yeah. I'm like, and I, you know, up top here, those are all like cases of, I'm trying to point in where you can see, those are all cases 7 inches up there, and it lines all the way back, and those are all grind 7s, and I got a couple more along here that you can't see, but I would always rather listen to a 12-inch just because I'm lazy.
When I was younger, I didn't listen to a lot of vinyls. I just listened to CD, and you had the possibility like to repeat songs. And I'm one of those persons when I find a song that I really enjoy, if it's the first or second or the third track, it could take me, and I'm not kidding, it could take me like 6 to 12 months before I listen to the whole album.
Right.
Because I really, really enjoy the same song. So when I like went to school, it took me like 15 or 20 minutes. I just listened to the same track over and over again until I got all the drums correct, until I understood the guitar. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly. You know?
That's the wonderful thing about a vinyl. It calms me down in a totally different way when it isn't up to me. It's like I'm not gonna, pick up the needle and like do that. So I just listen to the whole thing, and I start to enjoy an album as the way that a band or artist would have thought that a person should listen to the album. Yeah, like you listen to the whole thing, and how they want to present themselves. I guess that's the easy way to say it.
Yeah, like you sides are so cool because it's like if you have an album, you have two first songs, right? You have the first song on side A and the first song on side B. So when things were only designed, so like, when it's like 80s and prior, when you listen to those albums, they were so strategic about the order, right? Like this is the second song, right? And then so, you got that first song to grab them, but you've got to really solidify the listening experience by that second track. You lost them. And it's very different from now, especially with pop artists and hip hop artists that are like literally writing singles. They are, you can download one song on iTunes, which is so foreign to me because like I just lived in a CD and record store as a teenager, right? Like it's just like this is the album that I am going to buy, versus like I'm just going to download this song or just listen to it on YouTube. And there's nothing wrong with people who are experiencing music that way, but for me, I worry that they are losing out on the connection that you have with somebody where you have to invest time into going to find an album, right? Like if you like get on a subway and you go downtown and you wait in line and you pick it up and you go home and you listen to it, you're going to definitely listen to that versus like downloading a song and maybe I'll listen to it later. Like I just spent like 2 hours of my time trying to get this CD when I'm like 16. It's a very different experience for kids nowadays. You might not be as inclined to feel like you owe it to yourself to listen to it, right? I'm sure there's people who like download things and then never listen to it because it's just a click of a button. Why not? Oh, free on Bandcamp. Why not? Right? Yeah.
But that's the thing. Back in like 98, 99, when I started to find the bands on Napster, like one song, I lived in the north part of Norway. I lived there for 2 or 3 years, something like that. And I found a lot of black metal those days. I couldn't find it in Sweden in the same way since the Norwegian black metal scene. But anyhow, I went on to Napster and downloaded songs. Like nowadays, you can download it and you have it like in 1 second, literally. But back in those days, I can like download like 3 songs, and when I come back to school, maybe they were finished.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean? So it was another thing for me back then as well. And then I should figure out what band is this. And that was also like a mission. And after that, I went down to the record store, and this was a small town where there were like 10,000 people, but of an area probably as big as New York. Like you have your schoolmates living like okay, the measurements in Canada, you have different miles, but they have to go like 1.5 hours to school, something like that. You don't see that many people, but you go down to the record store and they have like, I don't know, 2,000 CDs, but you have to order them. It's like, and try to not misspell the name. They have to find it in a database, and it's like, and then I have to wait for 2 weeks, and then I got it, and it's like home. It's like, yes.
Yeah.
What's the band that is what band is the most important for you, like through your whole life, not directly at this moment?
Mm-hmm. I guess it's Metallica, just because they were the first band that I listened to. Like they're the reason that I wanted to play the drums. They're the reason that I got into heavy things. They're not always the band that I listen to the most, but they're the ones that like I could always go back to Master of Puppets and still be kind of blown away by it. Another band that has kind of like stayed with me my entire life, which is another kind of left field band, is Radiohead. I truly appreciate a band that doesn't really care about commercial success. Like they're a band that, since the 90s, they've really not had a single, like they're not releasing singles. They're just like doing kind of abstract albums, and there's a lot of great tunes that you might play on the radio, but that's not their goal. They just want to write music for themselves, and it'll sound different than the album before. And
I really surprise you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like the very different artists, of course. And then there's like a Latin keyboard player named Diodato, who was on CTI Records, and he's somebody who I just am just constantly blown away by how funky he is. And over the last 15 years, I would say, it's just I will always throw on like a Diodato album and just feel amazing. Most of the stuff was done from like early 70s to late 70s. Obviously continued on afterwards, but that's kind of like the period of stuff that I just, I will also, it just hits you the same every time you hear it, and obviously we already talked about October Rust. That's another one that so great important. Stuff.
Yeah. If you would recommend like 3 movies and 3 albums, what would that be to like an extreme music listener that maybe has just gotten into this kind of extreme music?
I'm going to try to go kind of different here with the albums, just to kind of give like a wider spectrum. Yeah. I think Cause of Death by Obituary that's my favorite death metal album, just because it's so slow and downtrodden. And just to kind of hear that, but juxtaposed with From Enslavement to Obliteration, I think that really shows, like, here are 2 things that are kind of in the same wheelhouse, but played at total different sonic spectrums, very different vibe. Those 2 albums I think are like super important. And then also I would throw in like Repulsion's Horrified in there, because, I know that people credit Recaputrefaction by Carcass as a kind of the blueprint of gore grind, but Repulsion's Horrified was like kind of accidentally a grindcore album. Like they were like a thrash metal band that was playing a little too fast, that incorporated death metal elements, but was accidentally playing grindcore, and so as a result, I think that's a good entry album for a lot of people who, like, hey, I listen to Slayer. I really like Slayer. Slayer is super extreme. I'm like, well, you should check out Horrified, because, it's like Slayer on crack, and, influenced all these other amazing bands. So I usually go to like early things. In terms of film, one of my favorite like things that is kind of heavy metal is in the film realm is Return of the Living Dead, which is a horror movie, but you follow these kind of like punk badass kids as they get zombified throughout it, and that film was directed by the person who wrote Alien.
I didn't know that.
And he's not really known as a director. He wrote a lot of great things, but that was his like one of the things he directed. And of the offshoots of the Living Dead franchise, I think that is one of the greatest horror films ever made. Kind of goofy, super tongue in cheek, but is very punk rock. I'm also a big fan of the Decline of Western Civilization documentary series.
Oh, I've never seen that.
There are 3 documentaries, one on, it's going to escape me what the first one is, but the second one, part 2, is kind of on like the glam hair metal scene, but it digs into thrash, like Megadeth's in it and whatnot. And there's a very famous interview with Chris Holmes where he essentially like drowns himself in vodka in his pool and his mom's watching, and it's so sad. And those documentaries were directed by Penelope Spears, who also directed Wayne's World. And she did an excellent film kind of looking at 3 different types of like metal, and it goes into punk by the 3rd one. And those 3 documentaries I think are like a really good look, kind of like an outsider view in on these things. They're super criticized by people, and I love watching kind of a controversial film in that sense. Very, very cool. trying to think of other movies to recommend for somebody getting into heavier stuff.
Did you grow up with the trauma movies?
Oh yeah, of course. Tromeo and Juliet. Yeah, anything that's like kind of gross and pushing the boundaries, I've always gravitated towards. My editor Rob and I were always talking about, like, we'll watch a movie, and if it's badass, we say, was that movie punk or was it metal? And sometimes it has nothing to do with what type of music's in it. It's just like, how does it feel? You know what I mean? Like, whereas like Decline of Western Civilization is a metal movie, whereas Return of the Living Dead is a punk movie, right? And when we made Slave to the Grind, we sat down afterwards. We're like, so did we make a punk movie or a metal movie? And I think we made a punk movie. Like it just feels a little more like it was more of a middle finger than it was like a her. If that makes sense.
And not too polished.
Like a rawness to it.
The dirty punk feeling.
Yeah, for sure.
If you would recommend like 3 grind bands that still play to people that maybe aren't, of course, like most of the grind bands are underground, but 3 bands that you don't think that people know about, what 3 bands would that be?
Okay. I'm going to start with Sulfuric Cautery. They are a gore-ish band from the Midwest United States. The drummer Isaac does Warsaw-style hyperblasting and super tight pingy snare drum. Lars from St. Anger would be impressed. That is definitely a band that's, is out there and giving it, and I think doing an excellent job at playing like almost like a certain type of like lo-fi sound. Like they're really, really good. Another band, Shit Life, who just released an album called Rain in Bud, opposed to Rain in Blood. And in the whole album is kind of an homage to that, like them on the back crushing beers, just like Slayer did. And they are very like quick riffy type stuff, very similar to like Meth Leopard, really fast riffs and whatnot. I think they're incredible. And another band who I know that you're familiar with is Organ Dealer, who I've had the opportunity of seeing many times live, and every time they're better than the time before. And Tom, their guitar player, I think is doing a really good job at doing like old school Terrorizer style riffs, but kind of with a new school sound to it. Like they're definitely more produced than World Downfall is, but in that similar vibe. And also just having spent so much time with them, they're the nicest guys.
Yeah.
Like I'm also just going to recommend bands where I also know that the people involved are really kind, right? And they're just lovely, all lovely dudes, and definitely worth supporting. Yeah. Those are the 3 that I think I would say. Yeah,
they're great guys. I talk to Jeffrey now and then, and I have some words with Eric. Tom has quit the band, by the way.
Has he really?
Yeah. He moved with his girlfriend. Yeah, and but he still like uploads some like cool stuff online and like stuff like that. But but he quit. Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that. Yeah, he's a school teacher. I know he's like a middle school art teacher. Really nice guy.
I had no idea. Yeah. Just give me 1 minute. Wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, Organ Dealer. Yeah, we played with them in Philadelphia, and I recorded their show at Obscene Extreme, and we met them at Full Terror Assault. Did you go to Full Terror Assault?
I didn't, but Slave to the Grind screened there, I believe. Yes, it did, but I wasn't there. I met them the first time at Ear Slaughter in Montreal. I think it was Ear Slaughter 2, and you played Ear Slaughter 1. Am I correct?
Yeah. Totally
and that's the only Ear Slaughter I didn't go to. I've been every year except for that one. So,
yeah. But you saw us at Obscene Extreme, I guess.
Yeah.
By the way, do you have any Birthplace vinyls?
Oh yeah, for sure. I have your split with PLF. I have the split with Organ Dealer, and I think every 7-inch.
Then you got more than me.
Okay.
And I totally forgot. I was going to ask you the name "Slave to the Grind." I talked with Robert R. Williams in Siege.
Yeah,
he was
awesome.
so happy that you invited him up to play your own fest, and that's called Slave to the Grind. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. Please tell me about it.
Yeah, it's currently been on hiatus, but we did a few years of it. We just called it Slave to the Grind Fest, and it was just an opportunity for, you know, us to do a show that was a little bigger than a local show. 2 nights, usually renting out a smallish venue, you know, a couple hundred people sort of thing, and then we would try to keep the focus on grindcore, but then a bit of hardcore and a bit of noise in there. Like we've had like Death Charge play as an example as a noise act, but primarily it's been, you know, like 10, 12 like grind bands, try to get bands that are touring through at the time. We haven't run it in 3 years because when we were going to do our last one, we had some trouble securing our headliners, and it was right around the time that I was releasing Slave to the Grind on DVD. And we're like, oh, we'll wait a little bit. And now we're in COVID territory. So I think we're going to hold off for maybe another year and then kick it back off again. But yeah, Slave to the Grind Fest was a lot of fun. And Siege was our headliner of our 2nd year doing it. And they absolutely killed it. You know, you never know with a band where they have refounded and then they have a new singer, you know, like that could be a recipe for disaster. But, you know, I cannot stress how nice those guys are and how fierce that guy sounded on vocals. Like just
Mark Fields. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Of course.
And like he was really good, you know, and, you know, when you've listened to, you know, that Drop Dead EP so much, you know, you're like, you have kind of an expectation of it being that good. So kudos to them. And Robert's a lot of fun. He's a really good dude. And not only was I happy to have him play, you know, he spoke very well in Slave to the Grind and is part of a very important chapter of hardcore's history. Obviously as a band that influenced so many grind bands from the more punk aspect of it, for sure.
Definitely. I'm gonna self-promote. I have the shirt on. I have done a fest in Malmö called Malmö Massacre, and you should come here next year.
The second that like borders open up and we're able to live again, like I am desperate to go check things out. So I will. Yeah.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you so much for spending this 1.5 hours with me. I really, really, truly enjoyed it. It was great to see you again, and I hope to see you soon when this Corona period is over.
For sure, and thank you very much for having me on. This has been a lot of fun. You know, I know that you like to get people out here to talk about their interests, but from like just like a fan talking to a member of Birdflesh as well, like. Your band rips, you know, so like I hope that you also continue playing and doing all sorts of great artistic endeavors, and let's have you guys touring Canada again as well, and we'll set you up with a nice tour.
Awesome. Dude, thank you very much.
For sure. Talk to you soon.